Time to talk to the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, though. To take us there, he was the Shadow Climate Change Minister, defending Labor's new climate policy.
Why does the Morrison government think they know more about business than the Business Council? Why does the Morrison government think they know more about industry than the Australian Industry Group? We want to work with industry. We want to work with business on this massive economic opportunity. We want to be partners with business. Anthony, as Prime Minister, me as Climate Change Minister, want to be equal partners with Australia's business in this massive economic transformation. The Morrison government thinks business is wrong.
Josh Frydenberg, welcome to the program.
Nice to be with you, David.
So the Business Council, the Australian Industry Group, they both backed Labor's policy. Has business got it wrong?
Well, firstly, we're all about reducing emissions. It's an absolutely critical economic and environmental objective. That's why the Morrison government has signed up to net zero by 2050. That's why we've reduced our emissions already by more than 20% ahead of many other comparable countries. But what Labor has announced is simply a reheat of the target that they took to the 2019 election, which Anthony Albanese said was an actual mistake. Now, Labor can't be trusted, David, on this important economic transition. The last time they had a go at climate policy, we got a doubling in electricity prices, we lost 1 in 8 manufacturing jobs, and Australians got the carbon tax that they were promised they would not get.
This is a different policy.
But Labor says they're going to legislate it. Labor's going to mandate it. Now, they won't do that themselves in the Senate. They'll do that in partnership with the Greens. And the Greens have a 75% emissions reduction target by 2030. So this is the first bid from the Labor Party. This is not the policy that if Australians voted for, Australians will get. And that is why I'm very sceptical.
Well,
indeed, Australians could be sceptical about
this. You could vote for it if they're in government.
Well, at the end of the day, we've got our target, which is 26 to 28% by 2030, but we're on track for a 35% reduction by that date.
Sure, but to your point, if Labor were in government, you were in opposition, you might even be the leader, you'd vote against this.
Well, we're on track. We're focusing on winning in the next election.
What's the answer to that question?
Well, we're not about to support Labor's policy. We've got our own policy, and that's what we're looking to implement. But reducing emissions is an absolute focus for our government. We've deployed $20 billion. We've got a technology investment roadmap. We're ahead of other comparable countries. Don't look at what Labor says, look what Labor does. And last time they were government, they gave us a carbon tax.
Let's look at the plan they do have on the table rather than the hypotheticals about what might happen after the election. This modelling has been done by Reputex. They also advised the government on its 2030 target back in 2015, same mob. It finds the policy would create 604,000 new jobs, lower electricity bills by $275. Are you suggesting Reputex has got that wrong?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that Labor Party is using the safeguards mechanism. Now, initially when we put the safeguards mechanism in 2016, it was designed to safeguard the emissions reductions we were getting from the Emissions Reduction Fund and not see a growth in the emissions coming out of the large industrial players. It wasn't meant to be this stick to mandate, to push these industrial players, to force them to reduce their emissions by a certain amount,
but
not taking into account their growth.
A lot of them are doing this already. Reputex says we'll save $275 a household each. 600,000 new jobs will be created. Are they wrong?
And we said disposable income will go up by $2,000 under our plan. You see, our focus is on a target and a plan.
I understand your plan. I'm just asking about Labor's. Are you saying that Reputex has got it wrong?
Well, I'm saying that Labor is using the safeguards mechanism in a way that will punish, that will penalise, that will force these large industrial companies, which are some of the biggest companies in Australia, regardless of their growth, regardless of what their plans are for expanding their presence.
They're members of the Australian Industry Group and the Business Council, and they're all backing this.
Well, I haven't agreed with the Business Council on everything. I remember they were pushing back on the big stick legislation, which helped get electricity prices down by 10% since December 2018. They were pushing us back on the digital giants.
Let's stick to this, though.
Yeah.
Are you saying the business groups have got it wrong, Reputex has got it wrong, the state Liberal governments like New South Wales, South Australia, Tasmania that have got far more ambitious plans than this, they're all wrong. All the countries around the world with more ambitious 2030 targets have got it wrong. But you and Barnaby Joyce, and he's the one who's pushed you to your 2030 target, you've got it right.
Well, firstly, we've got a 2050 goal as well. But we think we've actually got it right because, again, look at our track record. Emissions are down by more than 20% on 2005 levels. That's ahead of Canada, that's ahead of New Zealand, that's ahead of the United States, that's ahead of a lot of other comparable countries. We've identified the new technologies, not taxes, that we're focusing on: hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, soil carbon, batteries, ultra low-cost solar. That's our focus.
Okay, but you're happy to say to your constituents in Kooyong that all of these business groups and the international community and the state Liberal governments, they're all wrong, but Barnaby Joyce and you are right.
Well, what I say to my constituents, indeed the community across Australia, is I think we've got the right plan, that we're going to see emissions down by up to 35% by 2030. We're committed to net zero by 2050. This is an important environmental but also economic objective, and as you know, David, I spoke out quite publicly about the need from an economic perspective about accessing...
You said the cost of inaction would outweigh the cost of action.
Well, I said there's not just a cost of action in some respects, but there's a cost of inaction when you can't access cheaper capital from overseas.
Let's move on. The Therapeutic Goods Administration's now given the tick for the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, at least for 5 to 11-year-olds. Still needs ATAGI's approval. It's expected to be available from January 10. What sort of take-up would you like to see amongst kids that age?
Well, David, there's 2.3 million children in this cohort. We saw a strong take-up from the older age groups that were receiving it. When we were rolling out the vaccine at its peak, we were doing more than 2 million jabs a week. So we're very hopeful that we can cover this young cohort from very early next year. So I'm hoping for a very strong take-up, but ultimately that will be up to parents and those kids.
Is there any reason, do you think, for schools or other venues to require kids that age to be vaccinated?
Well, we haven't supported a mandatory vaccination program other than with respect to aged care workers and disability workers because of that particularly vulnerable cohort. But my message this morning would be to every parent that ATAGI, the TGA, they don't take these steps lightly. They do an enormous amount of work. The United States has rolled out the vaccine to this younger cohort, and I believe it will be an extra defence against the virus.
We're yet to see really how the Omicron variant will play out around the world. The IMF, though, is already indicating global growth projections will be downgraded because of this new strain. What will it mean for Australia economically?
Well, firstly, it's too early to make any conclusive decisions or estimates about the economy as a result of Omicron. But what we do know is it's transmissible, highly transmissible. There's some early signs that may be less severe than the Delta variant, and there is no evidence as yet that our vaccines are not a defence against it. I don't think we should be panicking. I think everyone should keep their heads and we should be calmly and safely reopening as we have been.
Is that a message to the premiers as well? Because South Australia's premier's weighing up what to do at the moment with their border.
Well, David actually spoke to Stephen Marshall this morning. He's keeping his borders open. He understands how important it is for families to be reunited at Christmas.
Did you tell him he should?
Well, he's taken that decision himself. He understands the importance of the economy of keeping those borders open. Let's not forget, though, South Australia is the first non-COVID state to effectively reopen, so he's watching it closely, as he should. So
at the moment, you've got a mid-year budget update coming pretty soon, the next 2 or 3 weeks. The outlook for growth for the economy
is strong.
Is strong? Stronger than at the budget?
Well, yes, and what I'm talking about for next year. Obviously, we were hit by the Delta variant, and that was something that was not forecast, to have your 2 biggest states, 13 million people going into lockdown, and we saw that play out in the September quarter. But we've already seen the OECD increase their economic outlook for Australia next year from 3.3 to 4.1%. You've got the RBA forecasting growth of up to 5.5% by the end of next year. So we'll make those upgrades to our forecasts in MyIFO on December 16th.
But you will be forecasting stronger growth?
We will be. And again, that comes as a result of the fact that we now have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, one of the lowest mortality rates in the world, and the labour market is coming back strongly. We've seen 350,000 jobs since the start of September. We've seen strong household consumption. Retail sales at the Black Friday sales was over $5 billion, was very strong.
Yeah, we're also
and business investment is up.
We're also seeing petrol prices rising rapidly as well, but wages aren't, and wages have really been relatively flat. For the 8 years you've been in government, have you worked out why and how to fix it?
Well, firstly, David, when we came to government, real wages were falling, unemployment was rising. In those years before the pandemic, after we came to government, real wages increased every year. And we now have the highest minimum wage in the world. Now, our focus at the start of the pandemic was obviously to save jobs. I mean, 1.3 million Australians...
I'm asking about wages, though, Treasurer.
But this is the key point. This is the key point. We saved more than 700,000 jobs, and as a result, unemployment now is at 5.2%, lower than when we came to government. Now, the way to get higher wages is to get a tighter labour market. And we're already starting to see some workforce shortages, which will have some positive impact on wages. But the way to drive increased wages is tighter labour markets. And we have the RBA forecasting, David, that unemployment will get down into the 4s and sustainably be there, and will be only the second time in the last 50 years that this has happened. So if you ask me, what has been the most significant economic achievement through this pandemic? It's been saving jobs and getting the unemployment rate down and avoiding the long-term unemployment that we saw in Australia after the 80s and 90s recessions.
Look, you started working in Parliament House more than 20 years ago as an advisor.
I had hair back then.
Correct me if I remember it. Were you surprised by the findings this week of the Kate Jenkins inquiry into the culture of the place?
It was a wake-up call, and as Kate has described in the report...
Was it familiar to you, though, what you read?
Not to that extent.
This has been going on?
Not to that extent.
I mean,
obviously, the last couple of years, there's been some very concerning allegations that have been raised. But what Kate Jenkins said in this report was that there was a normalised culture of misconduct. That is completely unacceptable in any workplace, let alone the nation's workplace. The Australian people have a right to expect that we are leaders and that we hold ourselves to the highest of standards and the best practice. So we have to get on with acting on this Kate Jenkins report. It's a multi-party process.
When will that happen?
Well, the Prime Minister's already acted. He's already sought some further information from his department. Cabinet will consider it before the year end. We'll be taking action on all the recommendations.
Before the end of the year?
We will be taking action on all the recommendations. We're absolutely leaning into this, but this is a multi-party process. This is our chance. I think this is our chance to draw a line in the sand and say to the Australian people, we will be better than we have been.
That all sounds good. Kate Jenkins, though, does make it clear one of the biggest issues is getting more women into Parliament, right? The New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party has adopted a target of 50% female candidates at the election. Your branch, the Victorian branch, has no target at all. And if you look at the most recent pre-selections to replace Tony Smith, Scott Ryan, Kevin Andrews, all blokes for the Liberal Party.
And Sarah Henderson just got number one on our ticket. We obviously got a vacancy now in Flinders. We've got a very strong female candidate running for that seat.
Well.
And then in 2 seats that we're looking to pick up, Sian Coombs in Dunkley and Steph Asher, the Mayor of Geelong in Corangamite, we've got 2 outstanding female candidates. Look, as
your track record, it's up to the pre-selectors and they keep picking blokes.
That's not right. And
well, they did. Well, in the seat of
I just said for the Senate, number one on the ticket is a female, and she's a great senator, and Sarah Henderson. But anyway, but look, you make an important point though about how we have to work together to get more women into Parliament. But there has been progress. I mean, 25 years ago, David, around 20% of the parliamentarians were women. 10 years ago, it was around 30%. Today, we're approaching 40%. In the Senate, it's 50-50. So we are making progress.
What is it?
Well, in the Liberal Party, we've been at about 38%, and we've got to do better.
In the federal parliament?
Well, it's lower in the House, higher in the Senate.
26%.
It's lower in the House. In the Senate, it's up there.
Your plans haven't worked on this, have they?
Well, we've made progress.
Not enough.
We've got to do more.
Josh Frydenberg, thanks for joining us, and all the best for Christmas and the New Year.
Thank you.